Last week I told you to start Dak Prescott, start Trevor Lawrence, give Kenneth Walker one more week before we start panicking, expect a dip in Keon Coleman's production from week one, and to be careful with Daniel Jones, but if you had to stream him, wasn't the worst thing in the world because his rushing upside could still carry him. Now, technically on that one, he well exceeded my expectations, but overall, good week in week two. Now we are here at week three and we're talking high risk sits. I've got 5 players for you that are risky plays for week three. We will talk about their week two performances, expectations for week three, and whether or not you should start them. If you have any start sit questions, of course, just go ahead and drop them in the chat. Starting things off with Omarion Hampton. Hampton's early season performance has been wildly underwhelming. He has failed to reach double-digit fantasy points. He has yet to score a touchdown. Last week's performance resulted in literally 3 fantasy points. Now, to be fair to Hampton, the Chargers' early season schedule has not exactly been run-friendly. Hampton's week 1 production was with Kansas City. We expected that to be not super awesome. Week two's matchup was with Vegas. That was tough, but we did expect some progression in his performance. Instead, we actually got regression, and we were hit with just 8 carries for 24 yards and 1 reception. Combine that with the underwhelming performance and the decrease in snaps and the increase in touches for Najee Harris, who was used exclusively on the Chargers' final drive after Hampton caused a fumble, by the way, which was erroneously charged to Justin Herbert. Now we turn to this week's matchup against Denver. Denver is typically a tough defensive matchup, but they just gave up over 200 yards total to Jonathan Taylor. But Hampton is no Jonathan Taylor. All offseason, the Chargers told us that they would be having multiple backs involved, but we didn't really take it that seriously, right? Because people are a little bit skeptical of Najee Harris, and they don't take him seriously, but Harris's presence makes sense. He is the type of back that annoys fantasy managers, but he makes coaches happy. If Hampton continues to split carries, he offers a very limited ceiling and a shaky floor. I have moved Hampton further back in my rankings this week. This one is rough, guys. I'm not going to lie here. It is one thing to be mulling over mid-round picks for start sits, but it is another thing when it comes to a guy that you drafted as your wide receiver 1 in A.J. Brown. Trust me, you are not alone here. I've got a dynasty team in A.J. Brown, and he is driving me crazy on it. Yes, we are officially at the point where we are starting to question whether or not we can actually trust A.J. Brown in our starting lineups. Start your studs is real, right? But when your stud's best performance is 7 fantasy points in PPR, you've got serious issues here. The Eagles are leaning so aggressively on the run that all pass catchers are suffering. I can forgive and excuse the week 1 matchup despite the way that Dallas looked in week 2 against the Giants. They did cover the Eagles receivers well in week 1. But in what should have been a very good matchup where the Eagles should have attacked Kansas City's mediocre secondary, they remained run heavy, with Jalen Hurts just completing 15 passes for 101 yards. No criticism. They won the game here, but we are talking fantasy football. The 2024 edition of Saquon Barkley saw a dramatic shift in Hurts' pass attempts from a career high of 538 in 2023 to just 361 in 2024, averaging 24 attempts per game. We're also seeing a continued target share issue here for Brown, with Brown and Smith fairly even in targets, and that is an issue that emerged last season. It's tough to sit A.J. Brown because he is, in fact, A.J. Brown. However, with another tough matchup ahead, Brown's limited production is a huge risk for your fantasy lineup. If you've got Brown, drop your comments of who you would start over him because it really depends on the situation here. Would I play a Rome Odunze over him? Yeah, I would. Would I play a Troy Franklin over him? We are not at that point yet. Abort mission, abort mission, abort mission. We're in familiar territory with Mark Andrews, but it is uncomfortable nonetheless here. Andrews has a grand total of 2 receptions on 3 targets for 7 yards this season. That is absolutely insane. There was a way to spin it, though, of course. 2 of those targets were red zone targets, and 1 was a touchdown catch that was punched out by the defender last week. Andrews obviously got off to a rough start in 2024 before becoming a touchdown magnet, catching a touchdown in all but 2 games from week 6 on. But it was the touchdowns that carry him. The high volume targets and yardage, they just aren't there for him anymore. Now, those touchdowns, they were very consistent. That was the one thing that he really got going last year. And for that reason, we cannot pivot away completely from Mark Andrews. However, It is extremely clear that the offense has shifted to pushing high volume to Zay Flowers, and Andrews' targets will remain limited and focused on red zone production. He is touchdown dependent, and he is an extremely risky start when there are multiple streaming options available that can garner higher volume. Until he proves that the touchdowns are going to be coming in consistently, we cannot start him. Heading into the season, I had a lot of concerns about James Conner. Those concerns are playing out live in action over the past 2 weeks. While he has been extremely underrated as a running back for his ADP, and typically every single season an automatic draft as an RB2 for me, his age kind of slipped up on us and it made me pivot away from him this season. A running back who is hitting year 30 on his team and him, they're all vocally telling us that they're going to be getting more touches to another running back. Yeah, that's a bad combination that you maybe need to get ahead of and realize that this might be the downturn portion of his career. I don't want to be dramatic about it because I do think that he remains a lead back, but I do also think that Benson is going to be a continued presence that limits Connor's fantasy upside and keeps him from that RB1 ceiling that we got so used to. I was willing to forego week 1 and use week 2 in a really good matchup as a barometer here, but week 2 came and it left us with 34 yards on 11 carries against one of, if not the easiest matchups for running backs in the NFL. Now, he got the touchdown, saved the day, that's fantastic, but yet again, he did not look like the best back on the field. Now, the matchup this week is against a 49ers defense that was very generous against the run last week. Conner isn't a complete sit for me because he still has a safe floor and a very good matchup here, but the ceiling feels limited and do not expect massive yardage from him. Terry McLaurin, good news. Terry got 9 targets, so yay, that was a big improvement from week 1. Good for you, Terry. Bad news, he caught 5 of those targets for 48 yards. That is not awesome. Now, we are still not panicking because Terry McLaurin got off to a very similar start last season. And when I say similar start, I am talking nearly identical stats. It is what it is. He is a big play receiver, and unfortunately, he doesn't have the volume floor that you would like to have from a wide receiver 1, and that is why he was being drafted as a low-end wide receiver 2 versus guys that you know will command very reliable volume. But the problem here is that we are starting to wonder if Deebo Samuel is really a big problem for him. My assessment during the offseason was that I loved the addition for Deebo Samuel for the Washington Commanders because it would play very well off of Terry McLaurin. They have very different games, and it would be a good combo that would result in what I thought would be the reduction of volume for Zach Ertz, who had a ton of volume and was essentially the second look in the offense last season. But Zach Ertz hasn't gone away. Ertz has 9 receptions on 13 targets and 2 touchdowns this season. That's a lot. So if Ertz retained his target share and Deebo Samuel is getting this very high volume here, Terry McLaurin's volume might in fact be suffering as a direct result from an offensive shift with Deebo Samuel. Still, he is not a guy that I would completely pivot away from, except there's one issue with this week, right? We might not actually get Jaden Daniels. As of the filming of this video, he is not practicing. We don't know for sure if he is going to play or not. Now, we did see Marcus Mariota last season with the Commanders in a couple of partial starts, and it wasn't that bad. He played the majority of their Week 7 matchup against Carolina, and while Terry McLaurin didn't have a touchdown, he did have 6 receptions for 98 targets. But can we trust that level of volume with Deebo Samuel in the picture? That's the major question here. Terry McLaurin is a high-risk asset that is dropped into the flex range this week. Drop your comments in terms of start sits. We'll have to play it by ear on a case-by-case basis with him. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also find me across all social media platforms at It's Terra Time, so make sure that you are tuned in because I will be bringing you more fantasy football advice all season long. Every week, I've got you covered with top waiver wire ads, live shows, with Q&A where you can ask questions, DFS content, and so much more.